Alrighty, I want to go over the Guess My Number program. There are a number of you that don't get the logic and not sure why. Because one of the things I had identified is that you need to create a flow chart. It will help you with the logic. You're going to see how easy this program is. Some of you are writing way too much code because you're not thinking it through or creating this flow chart. You just cannot just start coding. I'll show you how simple this is. So clearly the program function is to first you're going to generate a random number. You select the range. Let's say the range is going to be from 1 to 100. I created a little video in utilizing the random function. You want to watch that and how to use that accordingly. We're going to prompt the user what needs to be done. Then you're going to prompt the user to guess what the number is. If the number is too high or too low, you want to respond to that instance. And then obviously if the number is basically correct, then you just want to acknowledge that you guessed my number and display what the number is. So basically we end up having 3 different conditions. So we have to basically do one condition that is if the user number is greater than the random number, or if the user number is less than the random number. If those conditions are true, obviously one is greater, one is lower. If not, that means that it is equal to. So we don't have to even do an equal to, because if these 2 conditions are not met, that means the number needs to be equal. So if we look at the code requirements, right, you're going to make the program header. You're going to basically add comments where you need to. Some of you are not adding any comments. You need to add comments. Make sure you have the correct data type, because remember, by default, when you use the input variable or the input syntax, it saves it as a string. So hint, hint, you need to do something with that. And again, let's take a look at so we're going to import the random module and we're going to create a flowchart. So let's take a look at the flowchart, but before we do, this is a sample output. All right, so guess my number. Number is too high, too low, and then you basically guess the number. And then play again. This would have been actually part of the challenge code that I had that basically include the user play again. So some of you have this particular component, but it does nothing. And I'll show you how easy it is to actually have that in there by the flowchart. So let's take a look to see how the flowchart is going to be. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the system to get a random number. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to prompt the user to guess the number. And then here is our if statement. So if we take a look at here, we're going to go from here to here and then guess if the guess number is greater than the random number. If it is, then we're going to basically print that the number is too high. If not, we're going to continue on. We're going to check to see if the guess number is less than the random number. So if that is the case here, and hint, hint, so this is an if, this will be an else if. And then from here, we're basically going to say print number too low. And there is no other condition that we need to check, because if it's too high or too low, that means the other alternative is that the user had guessed the correct number. So in this case here, we're not going to utilize a no. All right, so this is basically how the program is going to work. Some of you had done this, and I'm going to show you what the result is. So again, we're going to have a random number, prompt the user, and then we have conditions here. And the last condition here, so this is going to be an if, else if, and then this is going to be our else statement, because that's the way it will work. And if we basically write the code like this, now one thing that I did is actually I'm displaying just for error checking purposes. I'm actually displaying what the random number is. So prompt the user, guess the number. So I'm going to say 55. The number is too low, try again. Well, the code is doing what it's supposed to be doing, because if we take a look at the code, it's going through here, guessing the number. If it's too high or too low, it'll print it out. But there is no there is no loop that continues on. So what we need to do is create a loop, and when the loop is true, right? So we're going to have an infinite loop. The only time that's going to break out of the system is when the user had guessed the number. So we need to basically up here get rid of this and insert here while true. So move this up a little bit here, and then what we'll do is we'll connect the dots. While true, so we have something like this. So now we're basically creating an infinite loop that will prompt the user to guess the number, and then the only time they'll break out is when we have the user had guessed the number. So then we'll basically break out of this. So let's go ahead and update the code to see how that works. All right, now that I run it, we see that our test number or random number is already displayed here. We'll do 55, that's too low. 80, I meant to do 88, that's too high. 70, too low, and then we have 73. Congratulations, you guessed my number. So when you look at basically the syntax, the code here, so when you look at the flowchart, it's basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 9 lines of code, and you're done with this particular program. And as you could see that it displays, guess my number, high or low, and it's done. All right, next let's take a look to see how this play again will work. So we're going to prompt the user after they guess the number to play again. So what's going to happen is we need to have if you think about it, a nested loop. What I did is also in the interim here, I changed the while true into a decision here, because in a way it is a decision, and to also kind of highlight things that this is going to be our inner loop. So that means that we're going to have a while true up here, and this while true is going to get the random number. This is going to be while true to play again. So this condition is the outer loop, and then this basically sets up the condition for the inner loop, as we've seen that it works. And a couple of things that we need to do with this. All right, so this means that while true for play again, and the condition is true, then it's going to start out by prompting or getting a random number, going through, and this is going to start the inter loop. And then when the user has guessed the number, it's going to break. And then when it breaks, then what we're going to do then is from here, we're going to then prompt the user, and we'll change the symbol here to here, play again. And then we're going to have another condition here. That means we're going to test out to see if no, right? If the answer is going to be no, then what we're going to do then is come out here, If no, then basically print thank you for playing, and then after that we would basically break out of the program and we're done. So if the answer is no, it's going to break out of the whole program, out of the whole loop, and we're done with the program. If the answer basically is going to be no, otherwise it's going to be Y, so that means, else, and then we're going to do continue. We're going to use the keyword continue with the program. We're going to use the word continue to continue with the program, and it'll basically come back over here. And when we prompt the user to play again, when we save the variable, I showed you how to basically look at the case settings, uppercase or lowercase. And remember that over here, this is going to be my else. So if the condition is n, we're checking to see if it's n, then it's going to break out. Else, we know that's going to be y, then we're going to basically continue on this part. Or you can flip things around. If the user selected y, you do the opposite on that. So let's now take a look to see how the updates in the code and how the program looks like. So now when we run the code, all right, so our number is 10, so we'll start out with 55, too high, 20, still too high, 1, too low, 10. You get my number. Would you like to play again? Yes. Now see, now it prompts the guess my number again, and let's do 77. 3, too low, 6. You want to play again? No, and it exits out the program. So when we look at the flow chart, we're looking at basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, let's say 17, 18 lines of code, and that's excluding any kind of comments that you'd have that you're going to be putting in. So that's basically the whole program right there. So it's not that complicated in terms of structuring your code. So now if we take a look at the challenge code in terms of what it's looking for, total number of guesses that are high and low, and the total amount. So you notice we guessed 7 high, 7 low. Well, you're thinking that should be 14. Well, not really, because on the next guess, you guessed correctly. So you guessed 7 high, 7 low, and 1 correct one, which basically is 15. So 7, 7 is 14, plus the 1 is 15. And then would you like to play again? Here, it's up to you. How do you want to do it? Yes or no, or 1 and 2 for yes and no. And basically give you a hint here. If you basically guess the number too high, you're creating a variable over here that you're keeping track of the guess that was too high. You're keeping a variable over here if the guess was too low. And then once you guessed your number before the break, you're printing out the results. And that's it. So it's just basically a couple more lines of code in here, and out here. And then if the user continues, you have to reset those numbers back to their 0 value, so it's able to keep a new fresh set of numbers. So it's just additional lines of code. So like I said, you could probably write this in less than, plus the that. So I would say at least a good less than 20 lines of code when it's all said and done, excluding any kind of comments in there, because you also need to have, because you're going to create your own separate function for this. Now, the other thing that some people are not doing correctly is when you run the code, you are missing my program header. So you're not structuring the code behind the scenes, the syntax correctly, because my information is basically missing. So again, you're able to write this code the way you see it here in less than 20 lines, excluding any kind of additional comments. Now, this portion over here is not 100% bulletproof. Same thing with here. We did not have any additional parameters. to double check and verify that the user had entered a valid integer value, which is not that difficult to add in, but for getting this particular logic in, this is what we'll do for the meantime. So again, any questions or comments, just let me know. For those of you that I reached out to, you need to fix your code because it's not working correctly. Okay?